everyone, welcome back to White Sparrow Living Luke 12:6. I'm Wendy and we're doing some Dollar Tree DIYs starting now. For this project I'm using a carrot wreath form, some fern greenery, a roll of loopy orange yarn, and some pretty ribbons. So I had planned to do 2 wreaths because we have double doors, and this yarn is so foofy that I thought it was more than enough, but it was only enough to do 1 full wreath, but it was exactly the amount that I needed for that full wreath. So I'm going to start off with some hot glue to get it secured in place, and then I'm going to start wrapping it. So I just hot glued a couple of rows and then worked my way up. You always want to start with the smaller end, and then that way your yarn is not slipping on you. At first I was trying to keep the loops going downward, but it turns out it was totally out of control, but I think it looks so pretty. And then as I wrapped all the way up towards the top, the carrot starts going back inward, so I had to use some more hot glue to keep it in place, and then just tied it once I got to where the leaves are going to go. So then for the top, I'm going to take 2 stems of my ferns and I'm going to tuck the stems into the inside of our yarn because it's open because we wrapped it around. And I cut those down, tucked them in, and then I'm going to use a zip tie to attach them to the wreath form, and they're snug as a bug in a rug. So now I'm going to make a perky bow, and I'm just using the fold over method, and I'm starting with this burlap polka dotted ribbon, and I rolled it over 3 times on each side, so there's going to be 3 loops, and then I'm going to leave a big long piece because I'm going to use that as the tail, and you'll see that in just a second. And then I took this really pretty carrot ribbon, also from the Dollar Tree. Everything here is from the Dollar Tree, I think in all of our projects today. But anyway, I'm going to do the same thing with this carrot ribbon, and then I'll do it with the other ribbons as well. And then once I get them all together, I'm just kind of setting them out because it's kind of hard to fold and hold at the same time. So I'm going to stack them up in the order that I want them, and then I'm doing this in 2 parts. So I'm going to do the smaller ones, and then I'm taking my scissors and making tiny little slits in the middle, and then I'll take a chenille stem, wrap that around that, making sure that it feeds right into those slits so that I can move my loops around more easily, and then I'll cut the long big loop so that that gives us our little tails. And then I'll do the same thing with the polka dot ribbon and the green sagey colored ribbon and attach those all together, and then onto my carrot between the greenery and the carrot itself. And then I dovetail all the edges and get it nice and perky. So then I decided to add one of these metal words, and since there was so much orange going on, I thought I would break it up a little bit and give it a little something something. So I took the word that says spring and used my white chalk paint to paint it white, gave that a couple of coats, and then took a big long needle and my white string and just attached it to the side of my carrot going downward, and it's done. And here it is all finished, and I think this is so cute. I love it so much. I was a little iffy at first about the yarn and how loopy and crazy out of control it was, but I think it gives it so much texture and it's just so fun. I really want to do a second one so that I have 2 for my front doors, but I love how this turned out and I hope you like it too. Today I am doubling down with my sweet friend Linda for the 2nd week in a row. You guys really seem to love her, and what's not to love? I don't even know how we got our schedules to line up, but I'm so glad they did. If you're coming over from Linda's channel, I'm so happy you're here. I'll have her video linked in the description box below, and make sure you listen to her beautiful Jesus message at the end of her videos because it could be meant just for you. For this project, I'm going to be using a round silver tray, an egg garland, some moss and floral foam, some flowers, but I ended up using some different flowers, and then this cute bunny plaque. And this was actually gifted to me by a sweet viewer, Robin, and I assumed it was from the Dollar Tree, but I looked at the tag and it was a little bit different, so it could be from Dollar Tree, but it also could be from Dollar General or the 99-cent store. I'm not sure, but it's so stinking cute. So I got him all ready to paint, and I put some spackle in the little hole at the top and then mixed up a mixture of some orange and white paint to match the little watercolor stripe, and I think it matches pretty well. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my tray, and I'm painting it completely. It's kind of a peachy color. It's between a pink and a peachy color, but it's super, super pretty. So I'm going to paint my tray, and then I'll go back in with some darker orange so that I can give it that watercolory look as well. So I wanted to add some branches to my platter, and I thought that would be perfect because I'm going to be putting moss at the bottom of my platter. So instead of letting it all kind of fall out and all over the place, this will kind of corral it. So what I did was took those stems, and some of them were still a little juicy, so they did bend without breaking, and then I'm just going to kind of form them into a circle and then add some chenille stem to keep them in place, and then I switched that out with some jute twine, and then once I got them into a circle, I put them into some water, let that soak for a day, and then pulled them out and let them dry for a couple of days. I actually thought it looked like a crown of thorns, so I used it in a couple of my sets in my last video. But once it was completely dry, I cut off all of my jute twine, and now it's in that permanent circular shape. And then I'm going to make sure that it fits around my bunny and is the right size. And then I took my floral foam, and I'm going to hot glue that to my platter, and then place my little bunny right in the center and just push him down so that he stays in place. And then I'm going to start hot gluing that moss to the floral foam so that you can't see any of that, and then I'll fill the rest of my tray up. So then I took my egg garland, and I just pulled those styrofoam eggs off and placed 3 of them on each side. This would be good for a coffee table, something that you can see on both sides, so I wanted to make sure that both sides were decorated. And on the back side, I forgot to mention that I painted the plaque in some white chalk paint. So now I'm going to take some pretty blush pink roses and add those in, and then I took some greenery from this other stem and placed those on the sides. I put a couple on each side, and then once I had everything where I wanted it, I glued my eggs in place, and it's done. And here's how this one turned out, and I think he is so precious and springy, and the artwork was perfect, so I didn't have to paint my eggs, which is always a good thing. And there's just enough little sparkly glitter in there to make it festive and fun. I love how this turned out, and I hope you like it too. For this project, I'm going to be using 2 vases, 2 votive holders, some floral moss, mini eggs, a ceramic bunny, and the cross I had to improvise, so I didn't end up using this particular one, some Jenga pieces, and some other stuff I'll show you in a minute. So I'm going to be using the bottoms of the votive holders as the lids for my vases. And so coincidentally enough, they fit perfectly. There's a lip on there so they stay in place. The only bummer was the stickers were a little hard to get off. So I just heated it up using my heat gun, and then they came off fine, but they left a little residue and some circles where you could see it. So I'm going to take my chalk paint and water it down and tap most of it off of my paper towel and just tap around there so that it covers those circles and kind of looks like calcification wood on concrete. So it worked out perfectly. So now I'm going to take some spackle and just cover up that little hole that's in this bunny's ear, and then I'll take my mini eggs and poke those into a skewer so that I can paint them. So I used my Waverly chalk paint in Celery, Ballet Slipper, and what was the other one? Crystal, and just added a little bit of white so that they would be nice and blended and soft colors. And then for my bunny, I need him to stand up a little taller because he's going to be in moss, and I wanted him to be secure, but I didn't want the moss to cover him. So I took some hot glue and added a Jenga piece into the little hole on his underside, and then took another piece going horizontally and glued that to him, and then we'll have a third piece once we put this all together. And then I'm painting him completely white, and then taking some Ballet Slipper chalk paint and just doing the insides of his ears and his teeny tiny little nose. And he's so cute. So now I'm going to take some butterfly stickers, and I'm going to sandwich a piece of wire in between two of them. These are self-adhesive, so the sticky's already on there, and that was super fun and easy to do. And then I want to coil up the wire, but I'm going to do it a little bit more in just a minute. So I took that third Jenga piece and I'm going to attach it again and then hot glue that whole piece onto the bottom of my vase. Now I'm taking my floral moss and putting it into the bottom and then shoving it down with my big fat nail that I use for so many different things. And then I'm going to wrap that wire around my big fat nail to give it a smaller coil so that he can be stuck right in the front of the bunny, so it looks like the bunny is looking at the butterfly. Then I added my eggs and then just used that same nail to move them around and get them in the position that I want. And then I took some teeny tiny little white flowers and poked those into the moss and then added my lid, and this spring one is done. Now I'm going to do an Easter one, and you can use the witch's brooms or these big brooms. These are both from Dollar Tree, so you have lots of options, or you could just go outside and use branches off of your bush or tree or whatever. So I'm going to cut these down to the size, and I want to make sure that it's short enough that my lid will still be able to fit on there. And then I'm going to make a cross by attaching some pieces together with my white string. In the meantime, my daughter's been busy with her air clay that I showed you last time, and she made these adorable little incense holders. I love these so much. I just wanted to show you guys this little froggy. I am just dying, and that's all out of clay that she made herself. So stinking cute. Very good job, Kennedy. So back to my cross, I'm going to wrap both of those with that string, and then I hot glued the crossbars over the vertical piece, and then using that extra string, I'm going to zigzag it around and tie that in the back so that it's nice and secure. And then I'm going to poke that into my vase to make sure that it fits. So now I'm going to take some jute twine and wrap that around my first two fingers and make a little crown of thorns and hot glue that to the top of my cross. And then I'm going to take some sand and pour some into my vase, and then take some rocks that I had. These are all from Dollar Tree as well. And I tried to find one that had the shape of what I would think looked like a tomb. And I'm going to take my Waverly chalk paint in white and make a little opening, and then add some black to add some shadows and give it some depth. And then I took another round kind of stone that might have been rolled in front of it and hot glued that to the side as if the tomb had been opened. So I'm going to place that with my needle nose pliers into the back part of my sand, and then place my cross right in front of that. And then I took some small little pebbles in different colors, and I didn't realize that one had fallen onto my crown of thorns until I looked at it. Everything I do is facing away from me, so I didn't see the front of that. But I do get that down. And I'm just going to use my nail to move things around and get it all positioned how I want. And then I'll place my lid on top, and it's done. And here they are, all finished. And I love how these turned out. I love that the concrete lids fit perfectly onto these vases. We have one for spring with the bunny and the flowers and the eggs. And we have one for Easter, celebrating the crucifixion, the resurrection, everything that Easter is about. I love how these turned out, and I hope you like them too. For this Dollar Tree DIY, I'm using 4 wooden arrows and some plant hanging chain, and I'm going to get everything ready to paint by pulling off all of the jute twine and the staples and anything that's on my signs. The letters and the little cutouts, I pulled those up using my CRICUT spatula. I'm going to be using the backs of these arrows as the front of my sign. So if I pull up any of that top layer of wood, it's okay. I didn't sand it or anything. I do paint the backs, but they're not going to be seen, so I wasn't too worried about damaging the wood on the back side. So once I have everything ready, I need to make holes because this is going to be a hanging sign. So I need to match up where the holes are going to be so that it's one continuous long hanging sign. So the top of my sign and the bottom of my sign will not have holes, but I do want to match up where those middle ones are going to meet up so that everything's hanging properly and straight. And I'm using my crocodile to make those holes. It has the spring action handle, so it goes in super easy, but the top arrow is a little bit thicker and the crocodile won't fit onto that wood, so I do have to use my drill to make those holes. Now I'm going to paint my arrows, and starting with the top one, I'm going to use my Waverly chalk paint in white, and then as I go down, I want this to have an ombre effect, which means it's going from lighter to darker shades of gray. So to do that, I'm going to take my white paint and add just a touch of my black chalk paint to make it a super light, pretty gray. And then once I'm done with that arrow, I'll move on to the third one and add a little bit more of the black. And then finally on my fourth one, I'll add more black to make it the darkest of all the grays. So I want to make these arrows highlight the major events of the Passion of Jesus and Easter Sunday. So we're starting with Holy Thursday night, and this was just before he was arrested, and he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and that's where he prayed and was so scared of what was about to happen to him that he actually sweat blood. And this is what's called the agony in the garden. And then the next day, he was beaten and tortured and actually almost to death right then. And that's known as the scourging at the pillar. And this would have taken place probably at Pontius Pilate's palace. And then later, Jesus would carry his cross outside of the city to a place called Calvary. That's where he was crucified and died on Good Friday. But then on Sunday in the morning, the tomb was empty and Jesus was resurrected. And that means that because of his sacrifice, even though you and I are sinners, he paid the price for us. And now we can be reconciled with God. And that's really good news. So now I'm going to count up 5 links on my chain and open that top link up using my needle nose pliers. And then I'm going to squeeze together the round part and then bend it so that it'll fit into my top hole. This was a little tough, but I used my table to get that to fold over. Now this is a little bit tough to do, so if you don't have the chain or you don't want to mess with this part, you can always use wire and just feed it in through those holes and attach it that way. You could also alleviate the holes altogether and just use ribbon on the back and just glue it on there. Whatever's easiest for you. And then to hang it, I'm just going to use an extra piece of that chain and staple that onto the back of my top arrow. And because it's a little bit smaller than the rest, because I only picked up 3 of the other ones, I used a wooden cross and used my antique wax to stain it. And then I'm going to sand the edges to give it a little bit of distressing. And then I'm going to take some jute twine and feed it through that hole and wrap it around the top a few times and then tie a knot. I was actually tying the knot in the back, but then when I cut the little pieces off, I thought it kind of looked like thorns. So I decided to add a couple more strands to make some more thorns. And that's our crown of thorns at the top of our cross. So now I'm going to cut a strip of this flowy white fabric from our friendly little ghost right here. And use that as the drape for our cross. And the white represents the resurrection. So anytime you see different colors, they always have different meanings. In this case, it's the resurrection. So I'm just going to drape that around and hot glue it on the back and on the front so it stays in place. And then I'll attach that to our top and second arrows so that it stays in place. And then it's done. And then to make sure that our walls don't get scratched, I'm going to take some hot glue and cover up all of those points where we entered the chain into our holes. And here it is, all finished, and I love how this turned out, and it's just so special. And again, I love using fun ways to teach our kids and grandkids all about Jesus, and especially at this time, it's a great way to celebrate the season. I love it, and I hope you like it too. For this Dollar Tree DIY, I'm using 3 of these long wooden signs, and these are really long. They're 23.5 inches by just under 6 inches, and so they were perfect for what I wanted to do. So I'm going to get them ready to paint, and I pulled out all the staples and the twine, and then I tried pulling off the fronts, but it had some really heavy-duty adhesive under there, so I had Michael J take them out and sand them all down. So I'm going to turn them over onto the back side, and then using some painter's tape, I'm going to attach all 3 together. I'm going to be painting a triptych, so I want them to be together while I'm painting so that it looks like it's one cohesive piece, but then we'll spread them apart. So I'm starting with my Waverly chalk paint in crystal and adding a little bit of black to it. This is going to be our sky, and I'm just using a regular paintbrush and just slopping it on there. I don't know what I'm doing. I always say I'm not a good painter, but I try not to say that anymore because you guys really get on to me, which is super sweet. But anybody can do this. You'll see I am literally just blending in the colors and making a moody and cloudy sky. I'm guessing what it looked like according to the Bible when Jesus was on the cross and it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon and the skies turned dark and it became like nighttime in the middle of the day. So I'm going to go down about 3/4 of the way on these boards and just mix that all in there going horizontally. And then once I get it to the way I want it, I'm going to take my truffle chalk paint, add some white in there, and just start making some mountains or maybe hills, I don't know. Something that might resemble what Calvary would have looked like. But again, no rhyme or reason, just mixing those together and letting the paint do the work for you. Then I'm going to take my ink chalk paint, which is really just black, and I'm going to make a squiggly line for a large cross, and then a smaller cross, and then a third even smaller cross. And that's literally all there is to it. So after I pulled my pieces apart, I got them set up and they were a little bit dark because the light wasn't on it like it was when I was filming. So I decided to lighten it up a little bit by using my white chalk paint and a dry brush and just went over the whole thing very lightly, but it made it look more rustic and old and not so newly painted. And so I'm going to also sand the edges and then it's done. And here it is all finished, and I love this so much. It was so simple, but it was so special, and I was listening to my worship music. It was just a really good therapeutic time that you can be with Jesus all just one-on-one. It's just so calming and peaceful in those moments. Anyway, I love it and I hope you like it too. I hope you enjoyed all these projects, and if you did, don't forget to give them a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think. I hope you'll subscribe if you're not already, and don't forget to go visit Linda's channel. Tell her I said hi. Remember the reason for the season. I hope everyone has a blessed day, and remember to always be the light. Bye!